It was a seemingly normal night in the intensive care unit when the alarm in room 17 began blaring. I ran down the hallway, and upon entering the room, came upon a scene that would change not only my career, but the lives of everyone involved. Mr. Harrison's ventilator was off, and someone was standing beside the bed, their hand still on the button. What I discovered in the next few minutes revealed a truth so disturbing, it made me question everything I thought I knew about compassion, medical ethics, and the boundaries between life and death. This is my story, and what happened that night still haunts me to this day. My name is Laura Brennan, and for 12 years I've worked as a nurse in the intensive care unit at Memorial Hospital in Seattle, Washington. I grew up in a small town in rural Oregon, where the rains were constant and fog covered the mountains almost every day of the year. I always knew I wanted to help people, and I moved to Seattle at 22 to study nursing at the University of Washington. The big city frightened me at first, the glass buildings reflecting the gray sky, the constant movement of people on the streets, the incessant noise of traffic, but over time, Seattle became my home. Memorial Hospital's ICU is on the 11th floor, with huge windows overlooking Puget Sound. On clear days, we can see the Olympic Mountains in the distance, but clear days are rare here. Most of the time we work under constant artificial light, with the sound of heart monitors creating a mechanical symphony that has become the soundtrack to my nights. I chose to work the night shift because I've always identified most with the silence and calm of the early morning hours. It's when families go home, when the hallways are emptiest, and when we nurses truly connect with our patients. My job isn't just monitoring vital signs and administering medications. It's holding the hand of someone who's scared, talking to patients who can't respond, but I know they hear me, and being the bridge between life and death. Every patient has a story, a family waiting on the other side of these doors, and I take this very seriously. It was a Thursday in November. The rain beat heavily against the ICU windows, creating that rhythmic sound that always calmed me. My shift had started at 7 o'clock, and I was responsible for 6 patients that night. 2 were stable, recovering from heart surgery. 3 were in moderate condition but gradually improving. And then there was Mr. Gerald Harrison, in room 17. Gerald was 68 years old and had been with us for 3 weeks. A massive stroke had left him in a coma, completely dependent on a ventilator to breathe. His wife, Dorothy, came every day without fail. She sat by his bedside, held his hand, and told him stories of their 45 years together. She talked about their 3 children, their 7 grandchildren, and the house they built together in Tacoma. Dorothy was 71, with gray hair always tied back in a bun, and blue eyes that held both love and pain. The doctors had been clear with the family. Gerald's chances of recovery were slim. The brain damage was too extensive, but Dorothy refused to give up. She said he was a fighter, that he'd survived Vietnam, that he'd built a company from scratch, that he wasn't the kind of man to give up easily. Gerald's children, however, had different opinions. I'd heard the tense discussions in the hallways, the raised voices in the waiting room. Around 10:30 that night, I was at the nurses' station taking notes when the alarm started going off. It was room 17. My heart immediately started racing. What do you think of what you've seen so far? Leave your opinion in the comments. I dropped everything and ran down the hallway. My sneakers thudded against the white linoleum. The fan alarm was loud, shrill, the kind of sound that makes your blood run cold. I pushed open the door to room 17, and the scene before me froze me for a second that seemed to last an eternity. The fan was off, completely off, and beside the bed, his hand still near the power button, was Marcus, Gerald's youngest son. He was 38, a lawyer in Portland, and his eyes were red from crying. When our eyes met, I saw something in him I'd never seen before. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't regret. It was relief. I ran to the ventilator and turned it back on immediately. My fingers trembled as I checked the settings, checked the tubes, and monitored Gerald's vital signs on the monitor. My training took over. Press the emergency button. Call the team. Check the airway. Assess the oxygen saturation. It was a matter of seconds, but every second mattered. The medical team rushed in. Dr. Chen entered first, followed by 2 other nurses. The room was filled with movement. Voices giving commands. Hands working in sync to stabilize Gerald. Marcus stood leaning against the wall, watching everything, motionless as a statue. We managed to stabilize Gerald. His oxygen saturation returned to acceptable levels. His heart was still beating, just barely, very barely, but he was alive. When the situation calmed down, I turned to Marcus. My voice came out firmer than I expected. Who turned off the fan? I already knew the answer, but I needed to hear it from him. Thank you for sticking around this far. I know this isn't easy to hear, but I need you to know that the best is yet to come. Stick with me. Marcus didn't try to deny it. He simply nodded, tears streaming down his face. It was me, he said in a broken voice. I hung up, and before I could respond, before I could fully process what was happening, he continued speaking. "You don't understand. No one understands. He didn't want this. My father made it very clear. He made me promise." Dr. Chen called security as I tried to understand what Marcus was saying. He began speaking faster, as if the words needed to come out before someone stopped him. "6 years ago," he said, "when my grandmother was dying of cancer, my father saw what she went through. Months hooked up to machines, sedated, with no quality of life. He invited me for coffee, just the two of us, and made me swear. Laura, he made me swear that if he were ever in that situation, I wouldn't let it happen to him." Marcus reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a yellowed envelope. His hands were shaking so badly, he almost dropped it. "Look, it's here. He wrote it. It's all written here. But he never made it official, never made a proper living will. He thought he had time. And then the stroke happened so suddenly." I picked up the envelope. Inside were 2 sheets of paper, handwritten in the shaky handwriting of an older man. I began to read, and my stomach churned. Gerald had written about his fears, about not wanting to be kept alive artificially, about wanting to die with dignity. The document was dated 4 years ago, but it had no witness signatures. It had no legal validity whatsoever. "My mother doesn't know about this," Marcus continued. "She never knew. Dad didn't tell her because he knew she wouldn't accept it. And now she's destroying him, keeping him here against his will. I was just trying to respect what he wanted." In the sigh. Following days were the most difficult of my career. Marcus was taken away from the hospital, while an internal investigation began. Dorothy was informed of what had happened, and her reaction was devastating. She screamed, cried, and accused her own son of trying to kill his father. Gerald's other 2 children were divided. Michelle, the oldest daughter, sided with her mother. Robert, the middle son, admitted that his father had mentioned something similar to him years ago but never took it seriously. I found myself at the center of an ethical hurricane with no easy answers. The hospital convened its ethics committee. Lawyers were involved. The police asked questions. And every night, I returned to my small Capitol Hill apartment and lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering what was right. I spoke with the hospital chaplain, an African-American woman named Reverend Williams, who had 20 years of experience counseling families in times of crisis. She told me something I've never forgotten. "Laura, in cases like this, there is no right answer. There is only conflicting love. Dorothy loves her husband and can't let him go. Marcus loves his father and wants to honor his wishes. Both are right in their own way, and both are wrong, too." I began researching advance directives, living wills, and patients' rights. I discovered that millions of people in the United States don't have these documents formalized. I discovered that entire families are destroyed by situations like this. I discovered that nurses, doctors, and the entire healthcare team are put in impossible positions when there are no clear guidelines. At night, when I made my rounds, I would pass by room 17 and look at Gerald. He was still there, unconscious, the ventilator breathing for him, and I wondered, what would he say if he could speak? What did he really want? It was the 2nd week after the incident that Dorothy came to me. She came into the nurse's station during my shift, her eyes puffy, but her posture straight. "Laura, can I talk to you?" We went to an empty consulting room, and she closed the door behind her. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice trembling. "After what Marcus did, I started rummaging through things at home, searching, trying to understand, and I found it." She pulled an old shoebox from her purse. Inside were letters, old photos, and another envelope. This one was hidden in his desk drawer in his office. I never went through his things. He always said that drawer was private, and I respected that all these years. I opened the envelope. There were more letters, written by Gerald over the years. One was addressed to Dorothy, but it had never been sent. In it, he apologized for not being able to talk about his fears. He said he loved her too much to hurt her with talk of death, but he had left clear instructions with Marcus because he trusted his son would be strong enough to do what was necessary. Dorothy cried as I read. "I didn't know," she repeated. "Why didn't he tell me? Why did he hide this from me?" 50 years of marriage began to unravel before my eyes. She had discovered that the man she thought she knew completely had kept a huge secret from her, not out of malice, but out of love, out of a desire to protect her. The other children were called. Robert admitted that Gerald had mentioned several times over the years that he didn't want to be kept alive by machines. Michelle, who had been so vehement in her support of her mother, remained silent. The already fractured family began to fragment even further, and then came the revelation no one expected. Gerald had an email account no one knew about. Robert found the password written down in an old notebook. When we accessed it, we found drafts of emails never sent to a Right to a Dignified Death organization. The hospital investigation intensified. Security cameras were reviewed frame by frame. They discovered that Marcus had entered the room at 10:26 at night. He remained there alone with his father for 3 minutes before turning off the ventilator. The footage showed him holding Gerald's hand, his back shaking as if he were crying. Then, his hand reaching for the button, the hesitation, and then the final movement. I was called to testify several times. Hospital lawyers, coroner's, family lawyers, investigators. Everyone wanted to know every detail. How long was Gerald without adequate oxygen? Was there additional damage? Could he have died if I hadn't arrived so quickly? The questions were technical, but each one carried the weight of a human life. The case began to leak to the media. Journalists called the hospital constantly. TV cameras camped outside. The headlines were sensational. Son tries to kill father in the ICU. Family at war over right to die. Hospital investigates attempted murder. Gerald's story went from being private to a public debate. Other families began contacting the hospital. People shared similar stories. A man whose mother had been in a coma for 2 years while the family debated turning off life support. A woman whose brother had left clear instructions, but his wife refused to honor them. We realized that Gerald's case wasn't unique. It was just one of thousands. Dorothy stopped visiting Gerald. For the first time in 3 weeks, the chair next to his bed was empty. Michelle told me her mother was at home, devastated, unable to face her husband. Guilt consumed her. Guilt for not knowing, for not realizing, for perhaps, deep down, not wanting to know. Tell me, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to know who's following this story with me. In the 3rd week, something unexpected happened. Gerald began showing neurological signs, small movements in his fingers, pupil responses to light. Dr. Chen called in a specialist, neurologist, Dr. Patel, who ran a battery of tests. The results were surprising. There was brain activity we hadn't detected before. Gerald wasn't brain dead. He was somewhere between consciousness and unconsciousness, a state that medicine still doesn't fully understand. But here comes the part that still gives me chills. When Dr. Patel tested Gerald's responses, he asked him to blink once for yes and twice for no, and Gerald blinked. Once. He was there. Somehow he was in there, trapped in an unresponsive body, hooked up to machines, living the nightmare he so dreaded. We called Dorothy. She returned to the hospital, running through the halls with renewed hope. "My baby," she said. "My baby is coming back." But when Dr. Patel explained the real situation, when he showed her that Gerald might be conscious, but completely unable to communicate or move, something in her broke for good. Dr. Patel asked the question that needed to be asked. "Gerald, are you in pain?" 1 blink for yes, 2 for no. Gerald blinked once. "Do you want to continue treatment?" 2 blinks. He said no. With his own neurological responses, Gerald was saying no. Dorothy fell to her knees beside the bed. The children cried. I cried. The entire team in that room had to face a brutal reality. Gerald was conscious enough to suffer, but not enough to get better, and he didn't want to be there. Marcus was right. His father really didn't want this. And now, he was stuck living the very thing he feared most. The situation had changed completely. It wasn't about what Marcus had done anymore. It was about what we were all doing to Gerald by keeping him alive against his express will. And the family met with the hospital ethics committee. It was one of the most difficult meetings I've ever witnessed. Dorothy had to face the truth. She had to choose between what she wanted and what her husband wanted. She had to decide between her selfish love, which wanted to keep him there, and her selfless love, which needed to let him go. It took 2 days. 2 days of conversations, tears, prayers, and heavy silences. But eventually, Dorothy signed the papers, the do not resuscitate order, the authorization for palliative care, the decision to turn off the ventilator. But this time, it would be done the right way, with the whole family present, with a chaplain, with respect and dignity. Marcus was allowed back in. When he first entered the room after the incident, he and his mother stared at each other for a long moment. Then Dorothy opened her arms, and Marcus collapsed into them, crying like a child. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry," she replied, cupping his face in her hands. "You were trying to do the right thing. I understand now. I understand." On the chosen day, a typical rainy Tuesday in Seattle, everyone gathered in room 17. Dorothy, Marcus, Michelle, Robert, the 7 grandchildren, and even some of Gerald's close friends. Reverend Williams led a small ceremony. Prayers were said. Stories were shared. Gerald was surrounded by love. When the moment came, Dr. Chen asked once more, "Gerald, are you ready?" A blink. "Yes." And then, calmly and carefully, he began reducing the ventilator settings. Gerald was adequately sedated so he felt no pain or discomfort. The family held his hands. They sang his favorite songs. And 43 minutes later, Gerald Harrison passed away peacefully, surrounded by everyone he loved. I held Dorothy's hand as she said goodbye to her husband. We'd been together for 46 years, she told me. And in the end, the greatest gift of love I could give him was letting him go. The following months changed a lot. The hospital implemented new protocols. Now, every patient admitted to the ICU receives information about advanced directives. Social workers are assigned to help families have these difficult conversations before it's too late. Gerald's story has become a case study at medical conferences on ethics and end-of-life care. Marcus was not criminally charged. The district attorney, after reviewing all the evidence, decided that prosecuting him would not serve the public interest. His actions were wrong, but his intention was to honor his father's wishes. The hospital chose not to file a civil lawsuit. Instead, Marcus became an activist, speaking at events about the importance of clearly documenting one's end-of-life wishes. Dorothy moved to Portland to be closer to her children. The house in Tacoma, filled with memories, was too much for her to bear alone. She began therapy and gradually began to heal. She wrote me a letter 6 months later, thanking me for caring for Gerald, for being a witness to their story, and for handling the entire situation with compassion. For me, that night fundamentally changed how I view my profession. I've always known nursing was about caring for people, but I've learned that sometimes caring means letting go. It means recognizing that there are worse things than death. It means honoring the patient's autonomy, even when it's painful for everyone around them. I still work in the ICU at Memorial Hospital. I still work the night shift. And every time I pass what used to be room 17, now renumbered room 17A, I remember Gerald. I remember the family destroyed and rebuilt. I remember that my job isn't just about saving lives. It's also about honoring the choices people make about their own lives and deaths. And that was my story. A night that started like any other and ended up changing everything I believed about my profession. Now I want to know, what would you do if you were in my shoes? How would you handle a situation where there's no right or wrong answer? Leave your opinion in the comments below, because your perspective matters and can help others facing similar dilemmas. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening and for appreciating my experience. This is just one of the many stories that nurses around the world experience, but rarely share. If you want to continue following real and impactful accounts of the lives of healthcare professionals, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. And don't stop there. Right next door, there's another recommended video with an equally shocking story you need to know. Click now and continue this journey with us. Until next time.